If you've ever sat alone by a lake at dusk, you know the feeling, water flat as glass while your chest is a sea in motion. That evening, wind pressed through the pines and carried the scent of wet earth and wild grass. On a lip of rock, Isabella hugged her knees, forehead tucked into the sleeve of a slouchy sweater. Her eyes were puffy in the soft light. Small waves tapped the stones as if they could pat sadness away, and somehow that made the ache sharper, not softer. From afar, Lakewood looked like a postcard. White-painted cottages with deep porches, a bakery sign weathered just enough to feel like a hug, old docks, and across the water a new resort, all glass and angles, reflecting the sky in a showy way. The contrast wasn't only in the skyline. You could hear it in the price of a coffee, in how people greeted each other, in which side of the wooden bridge you naturally stood on when conversations turned serious. Isabella grew up here. She knew the way the maples shifted color along the hill, the pocket of the lake where the weeds snag oars like a child holding your sleeve. But knowing a town doesn't always mean belonging to it, especially after the resort rose like a new sun and everything else had to learn to orbit. Earlier that day she'd tried to keep it together. She'd stocked shelves at the grocer in the morning, helped Claire at the community garden through lunch, trellising tomatoes, knotting twine over seedlings, scrubbing dirt from under her nails with a smile that only almost reached her eyes. She could do that, make tired look like busy, make hurt look like hurry. People would say, "She's fine, always moving," as if motion equaled okay. But then a comment, small, ordinary, the kind that slides into a conversation like a knife under a ribbon, caught her off guard. A woman from the resort, silk scarf and careful voice, asked if the garden could present better for the donors' walkthrough next week. "We love the authenticity," the woman said, "but maybe the edges could be tidier." Isabella nodded, said of course, noted the list. She even smiled. And then, in the quiet that followed, something inside her went out like a candle meeting a draft. So she slipped away to the lake. Light thinned. Storm clouds gathered in a slow braid above the ridge. Somewhere, hammering echoed from the resort's lakeside deck workers, pushing to finish the new pergola before the weekend's gala. Lakewood's old bridge, the one that seemed to hum with memory, stretched between two worlds, slats worn smooth, handrails warm from the day. Isabella stared at it, as if looking long enough might make a decision for her. There had been a promise on that bridge, years ago, a warm night and laughter knocking around them like fireflies. She had told herself it was nothing big. People make promises under summer sky and forget by morning. But he hadn't said it like a boy practicing romance. He'd said it like a vow he'd already started building from the inside out. She could still hear the words, could still feel the pause before them, the breath he took, as though the sentence had weight. "I'll come back for you." Time had done what time does, stretched, then snapped, then coiled again. The resort came, money came, then the hunger for more money. Faces she'd known since middle school changed the way they looked at each other, as if respect and status had quietly swapped places. That's how you ended up learning phrases like access and branding, in a town where you used to mark the year by when the lake thawed. Isabella had tried to be practical. She said yes to a relationship that looked right on paper, checked boxes, promised stability. Victor was a man people listened to. He ran numbers for the resort in a way that made investors smile, no mean feat in a place like this, where a lake view adds zeros faster than spring adds dandelions. He knew which wines to order, which charities to sponsor, where to stand so photographers could find him without searching. He could be kind in the way a spreadsheet can be kind, measurable, optimized, and when he wasn't, he was persuasive enough that people thought the problem was their expectations, not his performance. Her friends didn't dislike him. They just shrank a little around him, as if he took up more room than his body should. Ross, his freckled nose perpetually sun-pink, had a way of sliding his hand into Isabella's when Victor approached, like a kid anchoring a kite in a gust. Claire, practical and bright, told Isabella once, "He has plans for you." She'd meant it gently, but it landed like a warning, and you can't unhear a warning once your heart recognizes its shape. Another ripple knocked the rocks. A dragonfly stitched the air. Isabella wiped her cheek with the cuff of her sweater and tried to persuade her chest to quiet down, slow breaths, in and out, bring the ocean to a lake again. She wasn't helpless. She hated being mistaken for helpless. She was tired. Those are different things, though to the untrained eye they look similar. Behind her, footsteps, Light ones first, Ross, then steadier, adult steps, Claire. They paused a beat away, giving her the radius she needed. Any closer and a kind word might crack her open. Any farther and she'd feel abandoned. Claire spoke gently. We're closing up the garden shed. Thought we'd find you here. Hey, Ross added, voice careful, as if talking to a bird that might spook. We saved you a blackberry muffin. It's slightly crushed, but only because I was defending it from a squirrel. Isabella smiled, a real one, small but honest. That squirrel doesn't know who it's up against. Ross grinned, relieved. Exactly. I told him this was a matter of national security. Claire eased down onto the rock beside Isabella, leaving an inch of air, a courtesy of space that only a true friend remembers to give. Storm's coming, she said. We should check the tarps over the compost piles before it hits. You want to walk with us or sit a bit more? I'll sit a bit, Isabella said. I'll catch up. Claire squeezed her shoulder, light as a comma, and rose. We'll be in the shed. Take your time. Squirrel defense remains on alert. They left the muffin wrapped in a napkin on the stone, the kind of offering that, to someone who's tired, looks like proof that the world still makes small sense. When their footsteps faded, Isabella let the tear she'd been holding back slip free. It ran a clean track through the salt already dried on her cheek. Thunder spoke in the distance, still polite. Across the lake, the resort lights clicked on in careful choreography. Isabella pictured the weekend gala string quartets, chatter hovering over glass rims, the kind of laughter that always sounds like it knows a secret. She wasn't angry at any of it. Beauty isn't the enemy. It's the boundary around it that hurts, the way a velvet rope makes two kinds of evening out of one sunset. She didn't hear the last pair of footsteps until the bridge creaked, not the sound of a local crossing, a different rhythm, careful but not tentative. She turned halfway, shading her eyes against the lake's damp light, and saw a figure pause at the midpoint of the planks. He stood like someone who had learned, lately, to carry his choices rather than drag them behind him. He took in the shoreline. He took in her. The wind shifted and brought his face into clarity. For a second, all the air left Isabella's lungs in a soft, startled sound. Time didn't rewind. It just remembered itself. He wasn't a boy anymore, but the signature of him was unchanged, kindness in the eyes, a jaw that set not with arrogance but with resolve. Rain freckled the sleeves of his jacket, and then he did something unremarkable and impossible at once. He smiled, like he'd arrived exactly where he meant to be. He stepped off the bridge onto the rock path as thunder rolled closer. He didn't hurry. He moved like a person who understood that rushing makes everything louder. When he reached conversational distance, he kept his voice low, like speaking near a sleeping child. I came back for you, Daniel said, not breathless, not performative. As if he were finishing a sentence he'd started years ago on that very bridge and had walked every mile since to reach the period. The words entered the air between them and hung there, warm and certain. Isabella didn't reply right away. Some sentences you don't answer with mouth or mind. You answer with the part of you that survived while you were busy pretending you didn't need saving. The first cold drop of rain touched the stone. Another followed, and another, fast, as if the sky had decided at last. Isabella glanced up. The storm had closed the distance. Daniel lifted a hand not to take hers. Not yet, but to point toward the shed where Claire would be checking latches. Let's get you under a roof, he said, a small smile that asked permission instead of assuming it. She nodded, stood, and for the first time that day felt the ground steady itself beneath her feet. As they started toward the garden, the old bridge hummed behind them, planks answering the wind. Some promises are made with words, others are made with steps. Tonight, she would need both. Back when summers felt longer and the lake stayed warm past midnight, Isabella first met Daniel at a Saturday volunteer day the town put together for the old boathouse. The boathouse had a roof like a sigh and a floor that tipped toward the water, as if it still remembered launching skiffs in the 70s. It needed hands and time, and Lakewood had both just never on the same day. Claire organized clipboards and lemonade. A local band played covers with a drum kit that sounded like rain on a tin roof. People came because fixing something together made you feel less alone about everything else you couldn't fix. Isabella arrived late, hair in a knot, a pencil behind one ear. She'd just finished her shift at the grocer and smelled faintly of citrus and cardboard. She signed her name, grabbed a pair of gloves, and walked around the side of the boathouse to where a ladder leaned against the wall. A guy stood halfway up, shoulders tense, wrestling a rusted bracket that held the gutter in place. He was swearing under his breath in the polite way, like someone who'd been raised by grandparents and still believed the lake might be listening. "Need a hand?" she called. He glanced down. Sun hit the side of his face and lit his eyes the color of worn cedar. "I need a miracle," he said, grin easing the tight line of his jaw. "But I'll take a hand. Has Rumenda died at 2,000 BS pounds? The smoring levelly. In 12 there. Is Perry and a day. Friends, the team's in 7. She steadied the ladder and offered the socket wrench she'd tucked into her back pocket, because she always tucked tools into her back pocket. He laughed, happy, surprised. "You came prepared." "I work in aisle 7, she said. "There's an entire shelf where I can judge the torque wrenches by the cover." He winced theatrically. "Aisle 7, the one where men forget what they came for and buy 3 things that don't fit." "They'll be back," she said. "I like repeat customers." He freed the bracket with a clank that felt like progress and climbed down, landing with an easy balance. Up close, he looked like steady and restless, had found a truce in one person. He offered his hand. "I'm Daniel. He have to prisen the neist. He have to prisen. He have to fontily the light to into solighted for the breast. He have to prisen the light of the lighted. He have to prisen there is light. He have to prisen the light. He have to prisen the component." 7. "Isabella," she said, matching his shake firm. "1 pump, no nonsense." They spent the afternoon playing tug-of-war with time and wood. He had a way of listening that made a question feel like a doorway, not an interrogation. She had a way of making work a rhythm instead of a grind. They found a pace. Everyone else swirled around them, ladders moved, boards measured, a toddler escaped and was recaptured near the lemonade stand. But their corner of effort felt like a small, private engine humming steady. When the sun tilted lower, they took a break on the dock. The band packed up. Someone's dog barked at a gull like it owed him money. Isabella stretched her legs and wiggled her toes inside scuffed sneakers. Daniel dangled his shoes over the water, ankles knocking together. "So what's your plan?" she asked. "For the boathouse?" He squinted at the roofline. "Replace the rot, sand the rail, pretend I know how to stain without wearing half the can." "For you," she said, not coy, just curious. "People like you keep moving. Lakewood slows people down." He looked at her then, smile tucked into one corner like a secret. "People like me? People who show up with 2 left-handed gloves and still get things done," she said. "People who can't stand watching anything fall apart." He laughed softly. "Fair. I leave Monday. That you have no see my .os of the Brexo to the Brexov. We consided benotted, and leading the towns of the term, and havelet vast of a Brexov, and happies of the loke of the manager, connoted, and lex of the brex of the manage, and whiteys, and haveleted way. They have Velawin." "Ah," she said, and it wasn't disappointment exactly. It was recognition. "Where to?" "Back to the city," he said. "Family business. Long story. I'm here, sorting a few pieces, seeing what matters before I start stacking them again." She bumped his shoulder with hers. "That's a good reason to fix a boathouse." "What about you?" he asked. "I stay," she said, then shrugged. "Not because I'm stuck. Because this is where things are real for me. My dad taught here before he got sick. My mom runs the seniors' bake sale like a general. The lake's our calendar. When the lilies bloom, we make soup. When the leaves turn, we switch the fans in the windows. I like knowing my season by what needs doing." Daniel nodded like he understood something important and didn't want to scare it away. "I like that." Claire walked by and tossed them a bag of kettle chips. "Take 5, she said. "Then come sign up for tomorrow's shift before the motivated people fill the early slots." "Are we motivated?" Isabella asked after Claire moved on. "Moderately," Daniel said. "Strategically." They split the chips and talked nonsense that didn't feel like nonsense. Worst summer jobs, best pie fillings, the unfixable squeak in the grocery's back door that had become a soundtrack to certain afternoons. The kind of talk that lets the ground under a new conversation settle, strong and quiet. That night, after the last hammer fell silent, a group wandered to the bridge with paper cups of lemonade spiked just enough to warm. Someone strung fairy lights along the railing, a whimsical decision that paid off in photographs for months. Fiddles sang. People danced messy, Happy dances the way you can only dance with neighbors who taught you to ride a bike and watched you wreck a skateboard. Isabella and Daniel leaned against the railing shoulder to shoulder, not touching, but not touching. The lake breathed under them. He looked over the water like it might carry a map only he could read. "I'm not good at promising things," he said. She tilted her head. "Most people are great at it. It's the keeping that needs work." "Exactly," he said, grateful for the lifeline. "So I don't promise unless I can keep it." She waited, because you don't rescue a person from their own sentence when it's trying to be born. "I have to go," he said, simple. "But I'm coming back." He glanced down at his hands, then met her gaze like he was choosing courage on purpose. "For you." There it was. Not a grand speech, just a stake in the ground of a wooden bridge in a town that still kept score in casseroles and snow shoveling. She could have teased him. She could have turned it into a game. Instead, she did the only thing that made sense to the wise animal of her heart. She memorized his face in the light of a string of cheap bulbs and tucked that vow where you tuck things you expect to need. Because here's the thing, our niche understands those of you who stay up past midnight with earbuds in, letting stories wash the day off. A promise is not about certainty. It's about direction. It's about choosing a horizon and telling the storms you'll meet them with both hands on the wheel. Our niche knows that. You know that. You've chased jobs, moved cities, sat in apartment kitchens with cheap chairs and big dreams, and tried to convince your future you could be brave. You've taken small vows to your craft, to your people, to the parts of you that don't negotiate. So when someone says, "I'll come back for you," you don't hear romance first. You hear logistics, grit, time management, the physics of care. You hear all the ways it could go wrong and you still let it live. Life didn't pause for poetry. The next day the boathouse smelled like sawdust and lake. They worked until their shoulders burned. Daniel taught Ross small then, elbowy, forever curious how to square a board without relying on guesses. "Measure twice," he said, tapping the tape. "Cut once. And if you mess up, measure a third time before you tell Claire." Ross nodded solemnly as if sworn into a secret guild. When the weekend ended, Daniel wrote his number on a scrap of paper and tucked it into the inside pocket of Isabella's notebook, because her hands were covered in stain, and he couldn't bear to make them stop. "In case the squeak in the back door gets worse," he said. "I'll send a recording," she shot back, smiling. She didn't promise to call. He didn't ask her to. They were careful with words in the way people are careful with expensive tools. Use them often, but never wastefully. He left Monday morning with a clean t-shirt and a second-hand duffel, drove away down the road that cut through the pines, and disappeared the way people disappear when you're 20-something and plans are bigger than maps. For a while, messages pinged back and forth, photos of the boathouse railing, a picture of a city skyline, a joke about a hardware store clerk who thought drill bits were collectible art. The tone shifted as life shifted. It wasn't romance. It was something like weather reports from two places that knew the same lake by different names. Then the resort deal landed. Money began its slow, sure pour into Lakewood, and with it came a pressure that wrapped around every day like cling film. The grocery changed brands. The bakery adjusted recipes. The town council started using the phrase public-private partnership and didn't flinch when half the room frowned. Daniel was drawn into the gravity well of that money in a way he hadn't anticipated: land acquisitions, zoning meetings, conversations where old neighbors learned how to say stakeholder without tripping. He didn't own the resort, but he learned to speak its language, or rather, he remembered it, the way you remember a tongue you grew up hearing in the next room. His family's business, a network of properties and investments, had a seat at tables where decisions got printed into the shape of mornings, and in that space, promises become complicated, not untrue, just crosswinds. Isabella felt the shift first in the pauses. He took longer to answer texts. He called at odd hours with the sound of elevators behind him. When he came home in short bursts, he looked tired in a way coffee couldn't fix. They still found time to laugh, quick, bright exchanges that felt like the last slice of pie at a potluck. But slowness, once easy between them, started to cost more. It would have been simple to rewrite the past into regret. People do it all the time. If I hadn't believed, if he hadn't promised. But that's not their story. He had promised. He meant it. She had believed. She meant it. Then life asked them to prove it the hard way through weather. Meanwhile, the town tilted. The community garden, Isabella's soft rampart against the glossy tide, became more than rows of kale and sugar snap peas. It became a statement. That food should taste like where you live. That hands learn best by touching. That abundance isn't a picture in a brochure, but the sound of a kid biting a tomato still warm from the Sunday. Claire wrote grants, talked to the county about water rights, traded recipes for compost tips. Ross grew taller and learned the kind of confidence that comes from seeing seeds become dinner. That's where the tension lived now, in the shadow cast by a resort that called itself a friend and a garden that dared to be a home. And because stories love a mirror, that tension also lived between a promise made on a bridge and a life being built across a lake. When Victor arrived, clean shoes, crisp plans, he fit the new rhythm of town like a metronome. Efficient, decisive. He and Daniel weren't enemies. In another life they might have played on the same team, but they stood at different angles to the same Sunday. Victor thought in terms of levers. Move this, that shifts. He liked results he could photograph. Daniel, even when he wore the same suit, still watched the light on the water like it was telling him something he hadn't translated yet. Which brings us back to that evening by the lake, the storm gathering, the breath between a promise remembered and a promise repeated. Because this is the moment our niche waits for the return, not as a plot device, but as a test of character. Not the fireworks, but the quiet. Will he step onto the bridge? Will she let the door of her heart crack open a fractional inch? Will anyone remember how to listen when the wind gets loud? He said, "I came back for you." And the sentence didn't erase the years between. It braided them. It made use of them. You don't come back the way you left. You come back with whatever you learned strapped to your back. Sometimes that includes humility. Sometimes it includes knowledge you didn't want. Sometimes it's both, and those are the best returns. Before the rain broke wide open, Isabella and Daniel reached the garden shed. Claire looked up, took in their faces, and said nothing the way a friend says everything. Ross popped up from behind a stack of mulch bags, triumphantly holding a roll of duct tape like a trophy. "I reinforced the world," he announced. "Temporarily." "Perfect," Isabella said, breath finding a new, steadier pace. She set the muffin on the workbench, unwrapped it, and tore it into 3 pieces. Emergency rations. They ate standing up. Thunder rolled closer. The lake took a deeper breath. Outside, the bridge waited. Inside, a promise warmed the air. By morning, Lakewood put on its ordinary face, the one it wears when tourists aren't looking. Trucks coughed to life. Someone's radio leaked an oldies station across 2 backyards. The bakery window fogged, then cleared, revealing racks of sourdough like a parade at attention. Ordinary, here, is almost always a kind of mercy. Isabella's day began the way most of her days did, with a list. She kept it on a folded index card tucked into her phone case paper and pixels in a small truce. The list was not glamorous. It never is, when the things you love are living, growing, or human. But she had learned the alchemy of lists, how ink can steady a heartbeat. Morning block. Check irrigation at the community garden. Bed C still runs slow. Swing by the grocer, invoice mix-up on last delivery. Call Mom about Friday's appointment. Email the county about the compost bin permit. Return Mrs. Adler's pie pan and escape with only 1 new recipe, not 3. She pulled on boots that knew every rumor of the path and headed for the garden. The air had that washed, clean feeling storms leave behind, like the world had opened a window. Over the fence, sun hit the backs of kale leaves and turned them into 100 tiny stained glass windows. Bees already clocked in, busy like joy. Claire was there first, clipboard under one arm, hair in a scarf that meant business. "Water's good on A and B," she said by way of hello. "C is still sulking. We'll charm it," Isabella said, kneeling to inspect the drip line. She had a knack for coaxing stubborn systems into cooperation. Machines, schedules, people. It wasn't magic. It was patience paired with attention. If you look long enough, most knots reveal where they want to loosen. Ross coasted up on a bike with a squeak that might one day be eligible for historic preservation. He braked in a perfect skid that made Isabella wince and smile at the same time. "I brought labels," he announced, producing a handful of wooden stakes and a marker, "and I measured them like a professional. Claire says presentation matters." "Presentation matters," Claire agreed, mock stern. "If we want donors to take us seriously, beds can't look like a set from a zombie movie." Respectfully, Ross said, I would 100% watch a zombie movie set in a community garden. We live it every August, Isabella said. It's called Too Much Zucchini. They worked like a small orchestra. Claire tuned the schedule, who was watering on which days, which families would harvest the school plot, who needed a ride when the bus ran late. Isabella fixed the sulking drip line and rigged a temporary workaround that would hold through the week. Ross made labels with handwriting that announced to any passerby that pride lives in neat letters: basil, chard, cherry tomatoes, peppers, sweet, and dragon. Kids filtered in, shepherded by grandparents or older siblings. A toddler sat square in the path and ate a strawberry like it was a personal victory. The garden absorbed it all: noise, laughter. The rare wine turned it into proof that the world still knows how to feed itself when we let it. Here's the thing about power. It likes to dress up. In Lakewood, it wore linen and spoke softly. It sponsored scholarships. It hired local bands. It also bought the land that used to be a field where juniors practiced soccer and turned it into a members-only lawn with events that made older residents glance down at their shoes when they passed. We're building community, the brochures said, and in a way they weren't wrong. They were building a community. The question was who held the key to the front gate. Isabella didn't hate the resort. Hate is expensive. She couldn't afford it. She hated the math that made a town feel like two places overlaid, one where you belong by default, another where you request entry. She hated watching people who had been pillars all their lives suddenly feel like they needed to perform gratitude for the right to keep standing. But she also loved the creak of the bridge, the way the lake wore light, and the fact that on any given Tuesday you could be handed a jar of pickles from someone who'd grown the cucumbers 2 doors down. Loving a place means not letting someone else's definition of it be the only one. Which is why the garden mattered. It wasn't just vegetables. It was a sentence in the town's biography that said, "We feed each other. We teach kids that abundance is not something you buy, it's something you tend. We talk across fences and remember phone numbers and knock when it's snowing because we noticed your porch light didn't come on." That morning, while Isabella was showing Ross how to tie twine at a comfortable height, think about hands that are smaller than yours, or older. Can they reach this without a stretch? A black SUV rolled up to the curb with the quiet hum of expensive engineering. Victor stepped out in loafers that had clearly never been introduced to mud. He wore a checked shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to imply helpfulness. "Morning," he said, smile arranged like a centerpiece. Claire's smile didn't shift. "Victor." He glanced around the beds, the fence, the repurposed pallet that served as a produce table on Saturday mornings. "Looks good," he said, appraising. "The donors' walkthrough is on the calendar for next Thursday at 3. The Foundation's board will be in town early for the gala. They'd love to see what we're doing out here." "What we're doing," Claire echoed, testing the pronoun like unfamiliar fruit. Victor either didn't hear the nuance or chose not to. "We can set up a tasting, maybe little cards with bullet points, impact metrics. People love numbers they can repeat at dinner." Ross perked up. "We have numbers," he offered. "I can count how many worms are in the compost if that helps." Isabella hid a smile. Victor smiled back at Ross, but didn't register that Ross was the kind of person you should listen to if you want to understand a place. "We'll keep it high level," Victor said. "Anecdotes are great, but donors need vision, alignment." Claire's clipboard made a soft warning tap against her palm. "We'll be ready," she said. "On our terms." "Of course," Victor said, tone warm, posture firmer. "One more thing," he turned to Isabella. "The hospitality team is curating a small auction of experiences for the gala. Dinners, private tours, things like that." "I thought of you." "Me," Isabella repeated, neutral. "You have such a presence," he said, which is a thing people say when what they mean is you make other people comfortable. "We could package a garden experience, harvest and meal, a day with Isabella thing. People would love it." "People," she said, "or members." He held her gaze for a beat. The breeze tugged his cuff. "Members are people," he said lightly. Claire looked at Isabella, a conversation in a glance. "Your choice." Ross had gone very still, sensing a vibration in the ground. "Only kids here quickly." Isabella thought about the list in her phone case. She thought about the mothers who came on Saturday with exact cash and a pride that insisted on paying even when the sign said, "Pay what you can." She thought about a boy who'd proudly handed her a cucumber he'd grown and said, "Do you taste that?" It tastes like our block. She thought about a promise that had crossed a bridge last night. Let's keep the garden what it is, she said. If the board wants to visit, they're welcome during volunteer hours. We'll show them how things really work. They can pull weeds. They can plant a row. They can eat a cherry tomato and get a seed stuck in their tooth and realize that's the best part. Victor's smile cooled by a degree. Isabella, it'll make a better story, she said, softer. For dinner, he recalculated. You could almost see the graph in his mind. All right, he said after a breath. We'll do it your way, but I need you to meet me halfway in other areas. He lowered his voice, stepping closer. The gala guest list went out. People will expect to see you with me. Her stomach tightened like a fist. The assumption in expect, the casual addition of with me. She didn't draw lines in public. She'd learned that drawing lines invites an audience, and audiences make people theatrical. We'll talk, she said, and left it at that. He nodded as if a negotiation had just begun, and he'd already banked the first concession. Thursday at 3, he reminded the heir, then waved at Ross. Nice labels. Thanks, Ross said, polite. When the SUV pulled away, he exhaled an opinion. He says, metrics like it's a snack. Claire snorted. Some people do snack on metrics. No, I prefer muffins, Ross said, then glanced at Isabella. Are we okay? We're okay, she said, and meant it within the boundaries of this morning. That's the thing about okay, it's both a status and a practice. By midday, the list had shifted to the grocer. Isabella stepped into the cool fug of produce misters and cardboard. The back door squeaked, a sound so loyal it was practically a friend. She spent 20 minutes untangling an invoice that had double-counted yogurt but undercounted rice, then helped Mrs. Adler reach a bag of flour and traded 2 zucchini for a tip on pie crust. Vodka, Mrs. Adler whispered, as if making a confession. On her way out, she passed a bulletin board blooming with flyers. Lost cat, found, crossed out. Drum lessons, house cleaning, a notice about the town council's open forum on shoreline activation. The phrase pricked like a burr under a sock. Activate, as if the shore had been sleeping until money leaned in and pinched it awake. The afternoon was for county emails and the compost permit civil. Painstaking, the kind of progress you can't photograph, but you feel when the bin finally gets approved and a kid learns where orange peels go. She wrote with patience. She wrote like a person who understood that tone is a tool. She CC'd Claire. She CC'd herself for the record. She signed with thanks and meant it, because the woman on the other end of the email was also trying to make a system work with too few hands. By late day, heat pooled in the low places. The lake flashed through trees like a coin in a magician's fingers. Isabella cut through the park, detouring past the boathouse. The roof no longer sighed. It settled. She could still spot the boards she and Daniel had stained by hand, the place where Ross, smaller then, had dripped a dark teardrop on the dock and looked like he'd dented the moon. Ordinary magnifies memory. Across the water, the resort prepped for the weekend's event. You could tell by the trucks, the tents unfurling like sails, the sudden arrival of men whose job is to make rooms look as if they were always meant to hold 100 people dressed well. It would be beautiful. The music would be good. The speeches would sound like progress. And still, some part of Isabella knew that the most important conversations would not happen under lights. They would happen over a fence, by a compost bin, on a bridge. She reached the garden, where the evening chores are a kind of benediction. Water the leaves' feet, not their faces. Check the undersides for pests. Tell a plant it's doing great even if it looks like someone told it a sad story. Ross tallied worms for science. Claire updated the chalkboard with the week's harvest totals. People filtered in and out, trading greetings that included weather, kids, the creek's new stubbornness. Near closing, Daniel appeared on the path, hair ruffled by a wind that had forgotten to flatten itself for company. He carried nothing. He looked like a person arriving, not performing arrival. He paused at the gate, waited for Isabella to nod him in respectful of boundaries that had not been explained but were clear. "Can I help?" he asked. "Always," she said, and handed him the least glamorous job in the garden, cleaning the bins. He didn't flinch. He rolled up his sleeves, picked up the hose, and got to work like somebody raised by people who taught him that dignity is contagious. They worked side by side, not saying much at first. When you've pulled a sentence like "I came back for you" into the air, the best answer is action. He rinsed, scrubbed, stacked. She tied, coiled, checked. Ross, watching, decided something important about him and wandered over with a worm to introduce. Daniel admired it with the seriousness it deserved. After the last bin clapped shut, they stood a moment and watched a swallowtail trace a drunk path over the dill. Evening softened the garden's edges. The world pulled its voice down to a whisper. "How are you?" Daniel asked finally. Not the placeholder, "how are you" that fills space, but the kind that asks for a temperature, a direction, a weather report. Isabella considered. "Tired," she said. "Precise tired. But good. In the places that matter." He nodded like someone comparing maps. "I'd like to help in those places," he said, "if you'll let me." He don't. She didn't make him prove it with a speech. She pointed to the notice about the county permit. "You're good in rooms that make me feel like I forgot a language," she said. "There's a meeting tomorrow." "I'll be there," he said, with the kind of steadiness that makes a promise feel less like helium, more like gravity. Claire, pretending not to eavesdrop, clicked her pen and wrote, "Tomorrow Daniel" on the chalkboard under volunteers. Ross drew a small worm next to his name, which felt appropriate. This is what we mean, in our niche, when we say long form. Not just long videos, long care, long attention, the patience to watch a garden grow and to let a person show you who they are over hours, not highlight reels. By lockup, the sky had gone sherbet and then bruise. Isabella swung the gate, latched it, and turned to find Daniel waiting, not crowding. "Walk you?" he asked. She glanced toward the bridge, the line between two versions of this town. "Yeah," she said. "Let's walk." They didn't cross. Not yet. They followed the shore instead, feet agreeing on a rhythm, conversation keeping pace, workaday check-ins, a joke about Ross's worm ledger, a quiet that earned its place. Somewhere across the lake, music from the resort's test run threaded the air strings, warming up for a night that hadn't arrived. Here, crickets tried on harmonies and got most of them right. Tomorrow would ask for decisions, the county meeting, the donors' walkthrough, the question of how to show up at a gala without becoming a prop in someone else's story. But tonight belonged to the long kind of okay, the kind you build one steady step at a time along a path that smells like dill and damp earth and the certainty of your own 2 feet. Morning in Lakewood has a way of misrepresenting itself so gentle you'd think nothing big could happen here. Sun sifted through pine, laying bright coins on the path to the garden. The air smelled like water waking up. On days like this, it was easy to believe in simple stories. Seeds, plants, harvest, dinner, but every simple story hides a braid. Ross arrived first, backpack bouncing. He had that half-grown look, elbows outpacing shoulders, curiosity outpacing everything. He set his things on the bench and launched into a report without waiting for breath. 2 things. 1. The lady at the library says I shelved biographies in the wrong section, but it's because some people are alive and some aren't, and there should be 2 categories. 2. Mr. Nguyen says his beans are climbing the wrong way and it's personal. Hey. Claire glanced up from the week's to-do list, a mechanical pencil parked behind one ear. "Good morning to you, Chaos." She handed him a coil of twine. "Take this to Mr. Nguyen and tell him vines aren't personal, they're persuasive." "Oh," Ross nodded, solemn as a courier. "Persuasive. Got it." He jogged off, whistling something that traveled through 3 keys before finding one it liked. Claire loved mornings like this for a reason different from Isabella's. For Isabella, mornings were a promise that work could be enough. For Claire, they were a clean blackboard. She managed the garden like a conductor, eyes on 40 parts, ears tuned for one note, drifting sharp. She wore kindness like a uniform, but her calm had an engine. "We stretch," she told new volunteers, pointing to the schedule taped to the shed. Names, arrows, 2 neat columns labeled water and weed. "We improvise. We write down what we crash so we can fix it." She was in the middle of lining up a cart of seedlings when she noticed a small figure standing at the gate like a punctuation mark. The girl couldn't be more than 8, denim jacket, braids, a face set in that grave way some children adopt when they're figuring out how to carry more than anyone should ask them to. Claire walked over and crouched to meet her eyes. "Hey there," she said. "You looking for someone?" The girl pulled a folded note from her pocket, like it might unfold into a map. My grandma said to ask for Miss Claire or Miss Isabella. She held out the note with both hands. Claire took it like precious cargo. The paper had flower prints at the edges. Inside, "This is Mina. We're new on Harbour Street. Do you have a plot left, or a way for us to help so we can learn? P.S. Mina is a good listener. P.P.S. The bread is for sharing." Tucked with the note, a small loaf wrapped in a tea towel. "Welcome, Mina," Claire said, and meant it in a way that went deeper than 2 syllables. "We always have a way to help, and we always have a way to learn." She stood, extended a hand, and Mina took it, small fingers strong. "Come on, let's show you where the basil lives." The garden made room the way a heart does quietly, by expanding. Mina shadowed Claire through rows, how to pinch basil before it bolts, how to turn a leaf to check for pests without bruising it, the names of tools and the rules that keep everyone's hands attached to wrists. Claire didn't talk down. She talked across, the way you do when you respect a child's competence. Isabella arrived mid-lesson, boots leaving a trail of damp commas. She registered Mina's careful attention and slid into the scene as if the day had been waiting for this exact configuration. "You the new genius?" she asked, and Mina's smile appeared like a coin glinting at the bottom of a fountain. Isabella took one look at the bread and called a 5-minute break they didn't need, because sometimes you make time to bless a gift with use. They ate slices, still warm, butter melting into maps. Here's where small becomes large. Mina's grandmother's bread became an introduction. The introduction became a plot share. The plot share became a weekly rhythm that would, in a month, put Mina's grandmother's soup at a table with people who had never eaten soup like that and would talk about it for a year. This is what niche understands. Scale isn't only numbers, it's depth. You can build a channel with views, but you build a life with layers. Ross reappeared, twine mostly untangled, a smear of soil on his cheek like he'd tried on war paint. "Mr. Nguyen says the vines are now pursuing higher education," he reported, deadpan. "He also says we're invited to sample something called the good fish sauce if we bring cucumbers by Friday." Claire scribbled on the corner of the chalkboard. "Free Nguyen cukes, sauce ask about beans." "Perfect diplomacy," she said to Ross. "How'd your first day at shelving go, revolutionary?" "I'm going to propose a new system," he said. "Deceased biographies get a little ghost icon. Living get a spark." "That's one way to teach metadata," Isabella murmured. They moved through the morning's work like a troupe who'd learned each other's timing. Mina shadowed Ross for a half-hour, then switched to Isabella, then to Claire, the garden's informal internship. Curriculum, everything. She took to it with that fierce attention children deploy when a space lets them feel necessary. When she found a ladybug colony under a squash leaf, she called Isabella with the exact tone scientists use when they realize a hypothesis is about to hold. "So," Claire said quietly when the kids ran to the tool shed for a ruler to measure a miracle, "Daniel's name is on my board for the permit meeting." "He offered," Isabella said, eyes on the drip line she was adjusting. "He didn't push. He just showed up." "I like that sentence about him," Claire said. "He just showed up." She leveled a look at Isabella over the top of her glasses. "And Victor?" Isabella's mouth did that thing a mouth does when it wants to be fair and honest at the same time. "He wants us at the gala like centerpieces," she said. "I told him we're not for auction." Claire's pencil stopped. "You told him that?" "I told him that," Isabella confirmed, nicely. "The kind of nice that sticks." Claire smiled. "Proud of you." "I'm proud of us," Isabella said, and meant it. The plural wasn't decoration. In this garden, decisions had roots. Late morning brought a visit from Mr. Alvarez, who handled the school's aftercare and wore a whistle like a diplomatic passport. He stopped by on Thursdays to coordinate teen volunteers, kids who needed hours for graduation, and more importantly, needed to discover the particular pride of doing a real thing well. He and Isabella reviewed a list: who could handle harvest knives, who should stick to watering, who would flame out if you put them next to their crush. Logistics are love in disguise. "Saturday we'll have 5, Mr. Alvarez said. 6 if Jordan's mum's car stops pretending the alternator is a suggestion." "Put Jordan on the herb bed," Isabella said without glancing at her notes. "He thinks he hates vegetables, but he likes smells." Mr. Alvarez pointed, impressed. "Data-backed." "Human-backed," Isabella said. "You can see it in his shoulders when he walks past the mint." They high-fived on it, a documentation method not yet recognized by the county, but arguably more effective. While Isabella ferried a tray of seedlings down the row, Ross matched stride, clutching his own clipboard. "Hypothetical question," he began, which was code for, "Please tell me how to be brave without saying the word brave." Isabella said. "Hit me. If someone tells you something and you don't know what to say back, do you say nothing because you're thinking, or do you say something so they know you heard it?" "Depends," Isabella said. "Are they asking you to decide, or are they telling you who they are?" Ross frowned at the dirt, thinking this over like he'd been assigned a big number in math. "What if they're doing both?" "Then you breathe," Isabella said. "You buy yourself time with honesty. I hear you. I need a minute. You don't leave them alone in the dark, but you also don't flip on a light you're not ready to own." Ross nodded, storing it. Hypothetically noted, they dropped seedlings into pockets of soil. The garden, from above, would have looked like a patchwork of tiny intentions, each square foot a plan made of water, light, and the willingness to fail gracefully. And because grace often travels with trouble, that's when the first threads of the coming storm tugged the edge of the day. It arrived as a rumor, a text from a volunteer whose cousin worked catering at the resort. "Heads-up construction team moved equipment near the east path. Might block the public access during gala load-in." The east path was how half the neighborhood reached the lakeshore without cutting through private property. It was more than a path. It was a promise. Claire's jaw set, a line that meant a meeting was about to materialize out of air. She passed the phone to Isabella. Isabella read, then scanned the garden like a general counting hands. "We'll go look after lunch," she said, "before it becomes we're so sorry it's already done." "Want me to come?" Ross asked, halfway through sandwich number 2. "Yes," Isabella said, "and no heroics. Documentation first, confrontation second, escalation never, if we can help it." Ross saluted with a carrot stick. "Roger that. I brought my notebook. And 2 pencils because history demands redundancy." Claire stayed behind to run point in case county emails started sprouting thorns. Mina asked to come along and Isabella said yes on one condition. "You're the photographer," she said, handing over a garden phone they kept for admin and records. "You take pictures of signs, fences, anything that looks different from yesterday. You are our eyes." Mina stood taller by a centimeter. "I can be eyes." They walked the shaded path that cut behind old cottages, past a mailbox shaped like a loon, past a hydrangea bush that had decided it would bloom rebellious blue in a town that tried for tasteful white. The closer they got to the east access, the more the air felt like decisions, fresh sawn wood, diesel, the zip of a power driver biting into a screw. At the bend, they saw it. Temporary fencing, those linked panels you can stand up and take down in minutes, leaning across the public access, like a knee thrown across a bed. A sign zip-tied to the mesh. "Private event, prep, no entry." Beyond the fence, 2 workers in matching t-shirts rolled out thick mats to protect the lawn from delivery trucks. A third checked a clipboard, not looking up. Isabella's heartbeat didn't quicken. It clarified. Some people get louder when they're angry. She gets precise. "Pictures," she said softly, and Mina lifted the phone like a professional, framing the signs, the positions of the feet of the fence, the path markers that proved this was public right-of-way. Ross pulled his notebook, jotted date, time, names if they could catch them, brand of fence. It mattered sometimes. Accountability wears logos. Isabella approached the nearest worker, a woman sweating under a cap, forearms strong and honest. "Hey there," Isabella said, friendly as daylight. "I'm Isabella from the garden. This path is public access. Who asked you to block it?" The woman frowned, glancing at the sign as if seeing it anew. My foreman. We were told to secure the approach for vendor trucks." "Who told him?" Isabella asked. "Not accusatory, just breadcrumb hunting." "Hospitality manager," the woman said, checking her clipboard. "A Victor something." Ross's pencil paused mid-stroke, then continued. Mina snapped a close-up of the sign's zip tie. "Evidence is an art and a habit. Would you be open to shifting the fence 3 feet left?" Isabella asked. She had already measured with her eye. 3 feet would preserve the path while keeping trucks away from the ornamental grass the resort loved more than it loved the people who grew up here. "You'll still have your lane, and the public can still pass. I'll help move it 2 minutes. Thank you, firm." To get and from many fellows they find. The many fellows there. The worker looked relieved at the offer of a solution that didn't involve yelling. "If my foreman says yes, let's ask," Isabella said. They found him by the mats, a guy whose sunglasses did most of his expression work. Isabella presented the same proposal with the same calm. He shook his head before she finished. "We're under instruction," he said. "Liability, etc." "Whose liability?" Isabella asked. And the guy's mouth did the thing mouths do when they've been handed a question not on the cue card. "You can call the resort," he said, the universal punt. "We will," Isabella said pleasantly. "In the meantime, could you please not enforce a closure without city notice? This is a public right-of-way. There are rules for that." She said it like sharing a recipe, which is an underused strategy in conflict. He did the calculation: 2 minutes to shift versus 20 minutes to explain later, plus the intangible cost of becoming the villain in a story that might land on the internet, in a town where the internet is also the coffee line. 3 feet, he conceded. "But if anything gets dinged, we'll stay out of your lane," Isabella said. "We like your mats." They moved the panels together, Isabella, the worker under the cap, the foreman sighing his way into cooperation, Ross pretending not to be thrilled to carry heavy things, Mina filming the before and after like a tiny documentarian. When it was done, the path gaped open again like a throat allowed to swallow. "Thank you," Isabella said to the crew, meaning it. "Good luck with load-in. Watch the dip by the second Juniper truck's bite there." The foreman's eyebrows tipped in reluctant respect. "Noted," he said. On the way back, Ross practically vibrated. "Was that a fight?" he asked. "That was a fix," Isabella said. "Different genre." Mina replayed the video she'd shot, the fence sliding, the space reappearing. "I like when things go back to how they're supposed to be," she said. "Same," Isabella said. "But also, sometimes we make a new supposed to, one that works better." This was the first tug of a line that would later pull tight in the storm. It seemed small, 3 feet of fence, a sign moved from here to there. But small shifts are often dress rehearsals for big ones. Practice civics in miniature, and you're less likely to panic when the stakes scale. Back at the garden, Claire had orchestrated a victory snack, leftover bread with tomatoes and a slick of oil. She listened to the report, head tilted, filing details for later use. "Good," she said. "Document, de-escalate, deliver a better option. Proud of us. Just to the 70s of the testing so present, 70 of 2000 Veland is the Refos Lieferant. Also," Ross added, flipping his notebook to a fresh page with ceremonial flair, "we have a meeting at 2 about the compost permit. Daniel said he'd meet us there and translate administrative into human." Claire arched an eyebrow at Isabella, and Isabella kept her face neutral but failed, just a little, at the edges. "He offered," she said, as if explanation were required. "We're letting him." Claire nodded once. Endorsed. The afternoon stretched. Kids watered with more enthusiasm than accuracy. A dog made a circuit of the fence and decided the squash were not suspicious after all. Mina carefully transplanted a row of marigolds like she was placing lanterns on a path. When she finished, she looked up, eyes incandescent, and said, "They look like small suns, so the bad bugs get confused." "Exactly," Isabella said. "We're teaching the bugs astronomy." In the late light, Isabella and Claire packed for the permit meeting folders, a letter from 3 neighboring households, updated compost schematics that Daniel had visually cleaned up in a way that made the county sigh with relief. Ross tucked his worm data into the stack, in case anyone asks for engagement metrics. Mina fished a lucky coin from her jacket and pressed it into Isabella's palm with a look of solemn transmission. "For yes," she said. Isabella closed her fingers around the coin and felt the weight of 100 small yeses that had carried them to this door. Yes to a loaf of bread and a new friend. Yes to moving a fence 3 feet instead of declaring war. Yes to showing up to a meeting where the chairs would squeak and the fluorescent lights would make everyone look like underslept ghosts. This is how you build a town on purpose. With the long yes, outside the shed, the sky threw 1 silver warning clouds gathering their skirts on the ridge, a rehearsal for a storm still days away. The wind pushed its hand through the maples, and the leaves shivered like a chorus. The bridge hummed a note at the edge of hearing, an old instrument tuning for a future song. The county room had squeaky chairs, humming lights, and a poster about recycling that looked tired of repeating itself. Claire stacked folders like armor. Isabella slipped Mina's lucky coin into her pocket. Ross whispered, "Fluorescents make us all look like we need naps," which was true and did not help. A clerk called their item, "Community Compost Enclosure Design, Setbacks, Signage." The official at the center had a patient face and a clock's relationship with time. Daniel slid into the empty seat beside Isabella. Not late, just right. Tie loosened like he trusted oxygen. When the official began reciting code in code speak, Daniel leaned forward and translated in real time, soft enough for their table, clear enough to slow everyone's pulse. "What we're proposing reduces landfill volume," he said when invited to comment, "and it's safer than what exists labeled bins, pest baffles, 10-foot clearance from structures. The fence height listed here," he tapped the line, "is the county standard for visual screening without impeding airflow. Here are revised drawings with legible measurements." He'd redrafted the sketch so a tired brain could read it. Claire handled operations, volunteer schedule, lock protocol, who holds keys, how a complaint becomes a fix in under 48 hours. Isabella spoke to outcomes, school partnerships, seniors bringing peels, leaving with herbs, teenagers learning to return orange rinds to the cycle that made them. She said, "neighbors," 4 times on purpose. Questions came like mid-level waves. What about smells? Aeration plan, turned weekly. Rodents? Lifted bins, gravel skirt, lids that make raccoons reconsider their life choices. Access hours? Posted, with a number that rings a human. Liability. Town's rider already covers. Letter attached, page 3. The official's pen softened from stab to glide. Conditional approval landed with a small, satisfying thud. Yes, pending fence height confirmation and a sign visible from the lane. Claire nodded once, the dignified equivalent of a cartwheel. Ross underlined approved in his notebook 6 times and drew a tiny worm wearing a crown. Isabella squeezed the coin. Outside, the air tasted like rain practicing. They didn't get 2 blocks before Victor intercepted them. Linen shirt, gala smile. "Good," he said, already pivoting. "Now we can showcase the garden in the program, tuck it between the wine tasting and the silent auction." He looked at Isabella as if she were a bullet point. "Our terms stand," Isabella said, even. "If board members want to see the work, they come during volunteer hours. Gloves on, phones away." Victor's smile thinned. "Optics matter. Donors need a story." Daniel met his eyes, not adversarial, just steady. "Let the story be true," he said. "It travels farther." A PR manager materialized with a clipboard and words like alignment and platform. Claire handed her tomorrow's schedule. "We'll put you on watering," she said. "It's excellent for alignment." Victor tried one more angle. "At least attend the gala," he said to Isabella, softening the edges. "Stand with me for the announcement. People expect. People can learn new expectations," she answered. "I'll be where the work is." A beat. The PR manager, to her credit, wrote down gloves like it might be a keynote. Victor recalibrated and stepped back with a practiced nod. 3 o'clock walkthrough, he said. "Please be presentable." "We'll be real," Isabella said. "It reads better." They split Claire to file the final forms, Ross to tell Mina that a crowned worm now ruled over compliance, Daniel and Isabella toward the bridge. Clouds had gathered near the ridge, dark skirts brushing treetops. Across the lake, the resort unfurled another tent, white against the bruise of sky. "Thank you," Isabella said after a block of companionable quiet. "For translating?" Daniel asked. "For staying in the room," she said, "and keeping the story true." He nodded, accepting the job as if it had a shift schedule. Wind lifted from the water and pressed a cool palm to their faces. The bridge ahead looked less like a postcard and more like a line you choose to stand on. By noon the next day, the lake wore a different face, flat but tense, a sheet pulled tight before a spill. Wind came from the wrong direction, then from no direction at all. Phones chirped a weather advisory that used calm phrases for unsettled things. In Lakewood, people look up more than they look down when warnings arrive. Heads tilted, porch flags stalled. At 3 on the dot, the donors walked through filed toward the community garden linen. Name badges, polite curiosity. Claire met them with a bucket of gloves. "Welcome," she said, voice bright enough to host and firm enough to steer. "Hands first." A few laughed, like she'd made a joke. She hadn't. She waited, And because waiting is a kind of leadership. Gloves slid on. Isabella split the group in twos. You'll trellis, she told one pair. You'll plant marigolds. To another. You'll water at the roots, not the leaves. You'll help label so kids who come after you know where their dinner begins. She made, you'll sound like a gift, not a command. A board member raised a phone. Daniel, already in the row with a coil of twine, didn't scold. He offered an alternative. Lose the shot. You miss the story, he said lightly. Try this 1 hour helping, then one paragraph about what surprised you. Screens later. He said it like a man who knows what screens cost. To their credit, a few leaned in. A woman in heels discovered the joy of a cherry tomato splitting sugar on your tongue and had to steady herself on the fence. A retired executive learned that weeds give up easier if you ask at the base. A young associate asked Ross how to tell basil from mint. Ross told them to rub a leaf and smell, then deadpan, if you sneeze, it's pepper. Laughter softened posture. The board looked less like a panel and more like people. Victor hovered at the gate with the PR manager, restless. The scene refused to become a photo op. It insisted on becoming a memory. When he tried to gather everyone for a speech, Claire rang the handbell they use on harvest days. Break for water, she called. Share one thing you learned. The testimonies landed small and true. Tomatoes save the sweetest for the lowest branches. Marigolds are tiny suns. My back is not 20 anymore, but my hands remember. Wind moved in one long exhale across the beds. Above the ridge, clouds massed into intention. The advisory became a watch. Daniel caught the shift first. He had a storm kid's eyes, a childhood spent reading sky from docks and roofs. He leaned toward Isabella. We should tarp early. We do it, she said, and the garden slid into its practiced storm drill. Tools in, bins latched, hoses coiled, row covers ready at corners. Mina took the kids to lantern duty, flashlights check, batteries double, with solemn glee. Ross chalked a quick list on the shed door, storm plan A, so anyone wandering by could join the rhythm without asking. Across the water, the resort accelerated its own choreography. Last truck in, tent walls zipped, sound checks shortened to clicks and nods. A text pinged Claire's phone. A photo of the east path with panels inching outward again, apology attached like a bow. Isabella stared for half a second, then shook her head. Later, she said. Real storm first, human storm after. Pressure built in town like a held breath. Gossip tried to bloom, work kept it small. That's a rule here. When the sky darkens, you move hands before mouths. Isabella moved, tying, checking, delegating her voice, landing exactly where it was needed and nowhere else. Daniel mirrored her, absorbing load, asking nothing extra. Victor tried one more pass. If the weather turns, the gala moves indoors, he told Isabella, as if she were on the logistics team. You'll still attend? It sends the right signal. She met him evenly. When weather turns, we tend what feeds people. No heat, only a line. He tried a softer instrument. I'm asking as your partner. Then listen as my partner, she said. Tonight I'm with the garden. For a moment, something unpracticed flickered across his face, surprise. Maybe offense. He turned away with a nod that closed like a door. The PR manager lingered, eyes on the chalked STORMPLAN, and asked, very quietly, Do you need extra hands later? Claire grinned. Always, wear boots. Late afternoon, the first spit of rain peppered the path, singular drops fat enough to count. The bridge began to hum, not superstition. Wood does that before a storm, but anyone who'd ever made a promise there could hear a second note. The lake flattened to slate. Lights blinked on early. Somewhere a siren did its two-tone test. Isabella and Daniel took a last pass down the rows. Check the cucumbers, she said. They sulk when wind shifts. He lifted leaves gently, tucked a corner of row cover under its sandbag, tested the wiggle. Rain darkened his sleeves. They worked without hurry or talk, the kind of quiet that makes a promise a verb. At the gate, Mina pressed her palms together. Are we okay? She asked. We're ready, Isabella said. Not the same, but just as true. Ready is okay, Mina decided, satisfied. They dismissed the volunteers in waves, the way you land planes in weather, first the kids, then the elders, then anyone whose porch sits too close to a tree. The last crew, Claire, Isabella, Daniel, Ross checked latches and lights. Across the water, the resort's big tent glowed like a ship. On this side, the shed lamp haloed the chalkboard, now smudged with damp fingers, and the word yes circled around 3 times. By night, thunder settled in with its suitcase. Wind learned the garden's name and called it in a low voice. The bridge held wood, remembering its job. Inside the shed, a handbell, a lucky coin, a neat stack of towels waited like small talismans. Outside, the town took the deep breath you take before you keep each other safe. The storm arrived like a decision. Rain came crosswise, wind found every seam. Lakewood shrank to the distance between 2 lights, the resort tent, a white lantern, and the garden shed an amber thumbprint. A limb snapped near the lane, cracking the night open. Claire's text thread lit up, neighbors checking on neighbors. "Bridge," Isabella typed. Daniel was already moving. "I'll check north railing," he said. "You take the low path." Ross grabbed a flashlight and a coil of rope he'd insisted they store since last summer. Mina, posted at the window with the bell, whispered, "I'll keep watch." At the bridge, water shoved the pilings, not wild yet but impatient. Halfway across stood a cluster of gala guests in tuxes and satin shoes, storm-stranded after a shuttle misfire. They'd tried to cut over the bridge for a picturesque exit before the worst of it. Now the wind had other plans. A man in patent leather waved his phone like a flare. A woman hugged herself against the cold and the cost of being unprepared. "Don't crowd," Isabella called, voice low but carrying. "One at a time, hands on the rail. Slow is safe." She and Daniel met them at the midpoint, bracing bodies with palms and words. The bridge flexed, complained, held, a heel wedged between slats, panic spiked, contagious. Ross knelt, calm as a surgeon. "Got you," he said, popping the shoe free and passing it forward like a trophy. Laughter thin, real broke the fear's surface. From the garden side, volunteers appeared in boots and rain jackets. Neighbors, a couple of the more adventurous board members, the PR manager in a borrowed slicker. They formed a relay, hands, towels, a thermos of something hot that tasted like relief. Daniel took the rope from Ross and fixed a handline along the windward rail, 3 knots, clean and quick. "Hold here," he showed. "Lean into the pull, not away." They ferried people in 3s. The bridge sang its old song. When the last pair reached the shore, the group hovered, shivering, expectant, waiting for instruction or absolution. Victor arrived breathless from the tent, tie askew. "We have vans on the other side," he said, loud over the rain, "and a warm lounge if you'll just—" "First we check our seniors," Isabella said, pointing toward Harbor Street. "Then the creek culvert, and the far fence if gusts shift." She turned to the guests, gentler. "If you're warm and steady, come with us. If you're cold, the shed's open, use towels. Make tea. Keep the kids calm. Phones down, hands up." The PR manager lifted her chin. "Phones down," she echoed, pocketing hers. A man in the tux nodded, ashamed in a useful way, and started handing out cups. The satin shoe woman pulled off both heels and carried them like a lesson. Victor tried again, voice softer. "Isabella, the program." "Not my program tonight," she said. "No edge, only truth." She stepped onto the bridge again with Daniel to sweep for stragglers, light slicing rain into ribbons. Behind them, the garden moved like a single-body, neighbors and donors indistinguishable under the weather's equalizing hand. They found one more, an older man gripping the railing, pride keeping him stuck where fear had set him down. Daniel offered his arm. No speech. Isabella took the other side. "We're here," she said, and those 2 words were a whole town. Back on shore, someone started the generator. The shed glowed brighter. Mugs steamed. Towels made capes. Claire checked off blocks on a chalked grid. Seniors okay. Culvert cleared. Fence holding. Kids counted. Ross planted Mina at the door with the bell. Honorary sentinel. If anyone needed proof that the old order was cracking, they only had to watch a board chair wiping mud from a stranger's calf while a teenager briefed a CFO on sandbag technique. When the worst gusts passed, Isabella climbed the shed step for a breath-sized speech. "Thank you," she said, soaked, steady. "We take care of each other first. Tomorrow we'll argue fences and panels and programs if we must. Tonight we keep the lights on, we check one another, and we get everyone home." No applause. Just motion. The best kind. Across the lake, the resort's tent flickered and steadied. On this side, the bridge held, the garden hummed, and the power in town rearranged itself quietly, like furniture slid back where it always belonged. Morning made Lakewood look like it had washed its face. Branches littered the lanes, puddles held small skies, and the bridge, damp and stubborn, looked back at everyone like, "See? Still here." Claire's chalkboard turned into a command center for the recovery shift. Seniors first. Checked, fed, fussed over. Harbor Street, clear. Creek culvert, one heroic shovel session. Garden, tarps intact. Cucumbers only mildly offended. The generator thumped a steady bass behind the shed. Someone taped a note over the switch. "Do not touch. Seriously. Carl." Ross and Mina inventoried towels like quartermasters. The PR manager showed up in boots, hair braided back, carrying pastries and a willingness to be told what to do. Before noon, the county texted the final sign-off for the compost enclosure fence. Height confirmed, signage approved. A thank you for your thorough prep that read like a gold star. Claire circled yes twice and drew a small lightning bolt in the margin, the official symbol now for "we did it during weather." Mina solemnly taped her lucky coin on loan inside the shed where keys hang. "It worked," she whispered to Isabella. "You keep it until the first compost is ready." Across the water, the resort's big tent stood like a damp cathedral. The gala had flickered indoors and then mostly dissolved into small circles, sharing storm stories, the heel rescue, the rope line, the cherry tomato that tasted like summer breaking through the taste of adrenaline. A board member wandered over mid-morning with a borrowed rake and a sheepish grin. "We came to help," she said. "No photos." The seas reproited groovily. Isabella handed her a section of fence to mend. "Welcome," she said, and meant it. When Victor arrived, less polished, more human, he carried a thermos and apologies that didn't wear PR cologne. "The East Path," he started, but Isabella held up a hand gently. "First, thank you for sending the vans," she said. "Second, we need a formal agreement. Permanent clearance on the public access, signage we approve together, protocols for load-in so temporary never swallows right of way." She pointed toward the chalkboard, where Claire had started a list titled Path Mo. "Put your name under signer." 2. He looked at the board, at the garden, at the bridge that had demanded humility from everyone last night. Something in him eased a knot around optics, maybe untied by use. He nodded. "Sign me," he said, and wrote in a hand that for once didn't seem to be performing for a camera. By afternoon, the fence at the East Path rolled back to a sensible line and stayed there. A city works crew installed a small metal plaque, a dull, official thing that would outlast slogans. "Public access open dawn to dusk." It looked like a sentence that knew its job. Daniel split his time between torquing loose bolts on the dock and returning calls he'd ignored during the worst of the wind. When a partner asked about narrative control, he said, "We tell the truth and fix the bridge," and hung up with the ease of someone who had decided which rooms still deserved his presence. Later, in the quiet pocket behind the shed, he found Isabella coiling hose like a meditation. He didn't try for grand. He offered the day's simplest currency. "You okay?" he asked. "Tired," she said, still precise tired, but lit from the inside. "Good tired." He nodded. "I stayed," he said, "not just last night." A larger verb. She looked at him, past him, through the years between promise and presence. "I know," she said. "I let you." They didn't kiss like a movie. They stood shoulder to shoulder, the way people do when the work isn't finished but the worst is past, and watched Mina show a new volunteer how to pinch basil before it bolts. Sometimes love is a posture, side by side, facing forward. Toward evening, the garden became what it always becomes when a town remembers itself. A table. Not a literal one, there were crates and sawhorses, and an old door balanced on milk cans, but the effect was the same. Bread from Mina's grandmother, Mr. Nguyen's good fish sauce that made quiet men swear softly with pleasure, Mrs. Adler's pie, vodka crust and all. Ross presented a tray of cherry tomatoes like jewels and gave a 2-sentence speech about worm data that made people cheer. The PR manager, now just April, neighbor read a paragraph she'd written in a damp notebook. "I came for a program and found a practice. I came for optics and found hands." It wasn't polished. It was honest. People clinked cups. No one took a picture until after the food had stains. Victor arrived late, sleeves rolled for use, not optics. He carried folding chairs and set them up without comment, then stood at the edge of the light, listening. When he finally spoke, it was to ask, "Where do you need me?" Claire pointed at a stack of empty crates. "Those," she said. He smiled wryly and got to it. Learning sometimes looks like lifting. When blue slipped to indigo, Isabella climbed the shed step, not to perform, but to mark a beat. "We did what towns do," she said. "We kept each other. The garden's compost is approved, the path is protected, the bridge held." She looked at faces, shiny with sweat, rain, and soup. "Tomorrow we'll go back to watering and weeding and writing emails with too many CCs. But don't forget tonight. This is the shape of our yes." Daniel's hand brushed hers, small contact. Big truth. Ross rang the bell once, ceremonially. Mina, solemn, wrote a new line on the chalkboard in careful print. "We feed each other." Across the lake, the resort lights reflected a quieter kind of bright. A few board members lingered at the fence, not as donors, just as neighbors, passing plates and learning the names of herbs by smell. The tent's playlist, drifting faintly, landed on something with strings that matched the bridge's low hum. Two lakewoods, one sunset, learning to share the same weather. For our niche, the night owls with earbuds, the makers who measure life in drafts and edits, here's the takeaway. You already know in your bones. Promises aren't fireworks. They're routines. Show up. Fix the fence 3 feet at a time. Translate a meeting from code speak to human. Put your phone down and your hands up. Love is a schedule before it's a speech. If this story found you, if it eased your chest or sharpened your courage, pass it on. Plant a small sun where you are. Write your town's plaque in deeds. And when the wind starts naming everything by its right name, stand on the bridge you've built and answer back with the one sentence that changes rooms, days, and futures. We're here.